Handle the truth.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News right here on RBN Live, this 20th day of May 2025. We start with Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. You remember, this is a fellow Tulsi wanted to bring in to the Office of National Intelligence. He's a good guy. Talking about how
this video is for you.
Talking about how the Ukraine war is getting worse. Here we go.
On who's being sent from Ukraine and Russia, this isn't going to go anywhere. They're not taking ending this war serious.
A lot of this is miscommunication and intentional miscommunication on the European and Ukraine side. Russia never offered for Putin to go and meet Zelensky. Never did. In fact, this came after Zelensky and the four European leaders from France, Germany, Poland, and France that said, hey, we demand a ceasefire, an unconditional 30-day ceasefire on Monday, or we're going to levy all these sanctions. And Putin just said, yeah, we're not doing that. But I tell you what we will do is we'll have direct negotiations for the first time since 2022 between our side and their side. That's all he offered. And then Zelensky comes back on and says, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to come there, and you better come there, Putin, or everyone's going to know that you're afraid of me, which is what he said. Zelensky said
wow.
that. And Putin just said, never offered that. And you're a lunatic if you think that was ever on the table. Heads of state don't meet until all of the lower delegations have arranged nearly everything, and they come out to make the final negotiations or to present whatever was agreed upon. Nobody does it that way, but that's how it was presented over here. But what has been reported on both Ukraine and Russian media, as well as some in European, is that both sides said, all right, we're going to come in, we want to meet. The meeting is good. It's the first time you had direct negotiations since April 2022. But they said, all right, we're going to present our side. The Ukraine here's the 30-day ceasefire that we want. And then the Russian side said, fair enough, that's what you want. Here's what we want. We'll agree to that. Putin said this before the meeting, as long as our caveats and conditions are attached to it. Not an unconditional, that's not even on the table. But then came the real killer for the Ukraine side, as they said, our deal is basically the same one that was from June of last year, almost unchanged. You withdraw from all of the 4 administrative borders of the oblast that we have annexed, and that means that a lot of territory that they still control, you're going to have to walk away from all of that. You're going to have to demilitarize down to a very low number, and you're going to have to denazify according to whatever terms that they want, and, of course, no NATO. That's what the Russian side said. Or, and this is the new part, we will continue fighting, and then we will probably take all of another oblast, the 5th one in Kharkiv, and most or possibly all of Sumy in the north, and they threw in later on possibly Zaporizhia in the south. So they're saying you can either take this, what's considered an ugly deal from our side now, or we'll keep fighting until we get what we want, and then we won't negotiate about that. That was, I think, the biggest takeaway from this that has only gotten a little bit of press so far.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we have even reports from the Russian side that in Istanbul,
Mr. Wonderful here.
It was said that the Russians had upped it to 5, and they said, no, they upped it to 8 different oblasts. Now, here's Colonel McGregor. How do I...
That has to happen. They're not kidding. They're talking about these people who've run around and committed terrible atrocities, particularly in Bucha, which we talked about previously in other places, murdering civilians, murdering soldiers. They murdered people in the Kursk Oblast. That's unacceptable. That particular element in the Ukrainian government has to go away. The problem for the Ukrainian people is how can they make an impact when they're faced or confronted with the secret police showing up at their door and killing them? So it's a very difficult problem. The second thing is they talked about neutrality. That's not up for discussion. There will be no membership in NATO, yet you continue to hear that nonsense from Zelensky and others in Europe that, well, they're a sovereign state. They have the right to do whatever they want. Well, in theory, we all have sovereignty and we can all do things, but none of us can do whatever we want. We cannot do whatever we want. We live with other people on the planet. The Ukrainians live next to Russia. The Ukrainians live next to Poland and Romania and the Baltic states. They can't do whatever they want. All of us are constrained in some fashion if we want to live in peace with our neighbors. That's all nonsense. And I think the point is that in those oblasts in the east, where people have voted themselves into Russia, that stands. And as far as I can tell, those votes were by no means illegal. They were very fairly carried out, and people went out of their way in the middle of a war to go out and cast their votes, and they were not casting votes at gunpoint. So that's nonsense. The same thing was true in the Crimea. Those places are going to remain part of Russia. Now, if you're going to go in there and take the position that all of that's up for discussion, your negotiations aren't going to go anywhere. And we don't know, but I suspect that negotiations are going to break down over these conditions. And as the other point of this is, you cannot expect a ceasefire as long as you're convinced that the NATO states and the United States will continue to supply military equipment and support to Kiev. So at the end of the day, in Russia, they look at this and they see no real rays of hope whatsoever. If we stopped supplying the Ukrainians, which is something we should have done months ago, if we said we're stopping this, and if you don't negotiate, there will be no resumption under any circumstances of any aid. But for the moment, we're stopping it until you do a sit down and agree to talk with Russians. If we did that, I think that might have an impact. But we're not willing to do that. We're not taking the whole matter seriously. And indeed, we fixed it so that we are not being taken seriously anymore.
Yeah, and that is.
I think that's exactly right. How can Russia take the United States seriously any longer? Just ridiculous. Meanwhile, the Truth Seeker reports on the Kabuki Theater from Istanbul, Papi Escobar. Did President Putin really change the game by proposing the resumption of negotiations on a proxy war in Ukraine in Istanbul over 3 years after the first were scotched by NATO? It's complicated and depends on which game we're talking about. What the Russian move instantly accomplished was to throw into total disarray the European warmongering Three Stooges, Starmer, BlackRock Chancellor, Lapid Roy, Cocaine Express. Irrelevant Europe was not even at the table in Istanbul, except via sent a previous briefing of the low-rent, shabbily dressed Ukrainian delegation. That was compounded by the noisy banking threat on the sidelines advocating more sanctions to pressure Russia. Trump is still beating that drum. Meanwhile, Diplomacy Watch, Istanbul talks postponed and in shambles. The highly anticipated peace talks in Turkey descended into bluster and confusion, shambles, and a mess, according to reports, that were postponed until Friday after envoys arrived, but mostly used the media to vocalize frustration with the process. According to the New York Times, the evening Moscow ended without a meeting. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky made the rounds in press, complaining that the Russian president declined his offer of face-to-face talks and was instead sending his aid. But, as Lieutenant Colonel Davis explains, that's absolutely standard. Russia never assumed they were going to be there, that Putin would be there in person. That only occurs after we've reached a point of all the details being worked out at a lower level. So, InfoWars reporting, U.S. opposes endless negotiations on Ukraine coming from our Secretary of State. The U.S. does not want negotiation between Ukraine and Russia to drag on indefinitely as though this were our issue to resolve. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said, stressing Washington expects concrete result. Well, so what? Trump has really shown himself to be irrelevant. He's really talked endlessly about wanting to end this war, but he's done nothing to bring it about when he could effortlessly simply cut off supplies to Ukraine. That would end it. Meanwhile, Russia retaliation against Euroclear. We have here more reports of what's taking place. Here we go.
Is going on in Europe. We have a 17th sanctions package against Russia. Kaja Kallas announced that there will be an 18th sanctions package against Russia. Actually, it appears that Russia is taking the first steps towards retaliation against the EU, legal retaliation against the EU, more specifically Euroclear.
Yeah.
And we are getting reports that they're going to take Euroclear to courts in, I believe in Hong Kong is what they said, and basically it'll block Euroclear from doing any business in Asia.
Yes.
Interesting reports if they are true. It is a good retaliation, a very strategic retaliation from Russia to get at Euroclear, and it will have effects on Euroclear's business. We also have Merz, the new chancellor of Germany, talking about how he's going to build the biggest and strongest army in all of Europe, and he's being pushed to do this by his European buddies. So that shouldn't worry anybody. Germany trying to build the strongest military in Europe. Can it be done, given that costs in Germany are so high? They don't have any cheap energy anymore that powers their economy. Anyway, a lot of things going on in Europe. The one force that's driving Europe and that keeps them unified in all of this madness is, of course, Russia.
Yeah, Russia. Antagonism with Russia, completely unnecessary, completely pointless. Meanwhile, Israel's 77-day campaign of starvation enabled by the United States. Press TV reports. The Gaza government media office says Israel's 77-day campaign of systemic starvation in Palestinian territory, and that was on the 17th, this is the 20th, so it's now 80 days, is a direct result of clear collusion between the Tel Aviv regime and the United States. Let that sink in. For 77, now 80, consecutive days that besieged territory has faced a total Israeli blockade, with humanitarian aid deliberately withheld. This deliberate food blockade has led to widespread famine across all areas of Gaza, with 57 confirmed deaths, most of them children, due to hunger and malnutrition. That number is going to grow dramatically. According to the statement, mortality rates are on the rise due to diseases linked to food scarcity and the lack of basic essentials. This deliberate and systematic delay in the entry of humanitarian aid and the opening of crossing into the Gaza Strip is a direct result of blatant collusion between Tel Aviv and Washington, D.C. Yes, absolutely. Here's perhaps a more interesting piece, namely, since none of that is surprising, Israel has already lost the Gaza war from Middle East Eye. In the latest episode of the TV game show, the White House on Uber, how to pre-purchase a U.S. president appeared fleetingly as if the host were reading from the right script. U.S. President Donald Trump said in Saudi Arabia that liberal interventionism was a disaster. That's true. He said you can't break and remake nations. Post-Soviet Russia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Yemen are each testimony to that. He stopped bombing Yemen and reversed decades of sanctions on Syria, blocking in the process two of Israel's key routes to regional dominance. dividing Syria and starting a war with Iran. I say fleetingly, because as Iran has been through this script many times before in negotiations over its nuclear program, what a U.S. president promises and what he delivers are two different things. 100% correct. Two different things indeed. Meanwhile, children are among the 100 and Israel begins its Gaza ground operation, killing 144 in relentless bombardment. The Israeli military targets hospitals and homes in the most intense bombardment since the start of the war, where Bibi has declared he wants a new onslaught to finish a job. The Israeli military has announced the beginning of an extensive new ground operation throughout northern and southern Gaza. On a day, it killed at least 144 in waves of relentless strikes across the Palestinian enclave. At least 36 were killed, more than 100 wounded, when Israeli warplanes bombed a tent camp sheltering displaced Palestinians in the Al-Mawasi area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, medical sources told Al Jazeera. Meanwhile, more Israel killing 115. The numbers keep going. It is a war of attrition as it expands. It's assault on Gaza. What else? What else is new? Meanwhile, here's an interesting report. Why Israel's demand for Hamas to disarm is a red herring. Every blockade convoy, every broken truth, every rejected peace offer underscores Israel's true objective, erasing Palestinians from Gaza. Yes, yes, yes. None of us are surprised. That's exactly right. Meanwhile, invincible, Iran's one-of-a-kind missile launch system, nuclear strike proof. Let's hear about this. Deep dive
defense. Military and aerospace enthusiasts. Over here we give rare insights you won't hear elsewhere. Today's topic focuses on a worldwide unique strategic missile launch concept unveiled by Iran 5 years ago in 2020, never to be shown again. This revelation occurred amid heightened tensions, as Iran perceived threats of a potential strike, even with nuclear weapons, by the then outgoing Trump administration. The system in question is a one-of-a-kind type of tunnel complex, constructed deep within the heart of a mountain. This launch concept was historically regarded as the most survivable missile basing concept during 1970s-era U.S. trials for next-generation heavy intercontinental ballistic missile, the MX Peacekeeper. At that time, however, the prohibitive construction costs led the United States to abandon this approach. Known as the hard tunnel portal launch concept, which was engineered to endure massive salvos of nuclear strikes while retaining assured second strike retaliation capability. Drop a like to push the channel, and let's start. Iran typically avoids publicizing facilities of such strategic importance, which are critical to national survival. Yet the escalating tensions of that period compelled Iran to disclose capabilities intended to deter U.S. military action. This facility is acknowledged as the most robust category of Iran's so-called missile cities. A link to the video further detailing this topic is provided above.
Really good. Iran, I think, has all kinds of military capabilities the United States and Israel do not appreciate. Here's a story about 5 missiles that are impossible
to intercept. Number 5, DF-17, China. The DF-17 is a hypersonic glide vehicle reaching Mach 10 with a range of 1,550 miles. After launch, it detaches and flies at low altitudes with erratic paths, evading radar systems designed for predictable ballistic arcs. Its speed and flight behavior give defenders just seconds to respond. Number 4, Iskander-M, Russia. The Iskander-M flies up to Mach 7 over 500 miles with a quasi-ballistic evasive trajectory. In the terminal phase, it pulls up to 30 Gs and releases decoys, overwhelming systems like Patriot and THAAD. Number 3, Iskander-M, China. The Iskander-M flies up to Mach 7 over 500 miles with a quasi-ballistic evasive trajectory. In the terminal phase, it pulls up to 30 Gs and releases decoys, overwhelming systems like Patriot and THAAD. It strikes before most defenses can even react. Number 3, Kinzhal, KH-47M2, Russia. The Kinzhal is an air-launched missile reaching Mach 12 over 1,860 miles. Launched from a MiG-31K, it follows a part ballistic, part aerodynamic path, adjusting mid-flight. Its speed, angle of approach, and flexibility bypass fixed defense networks. Number 2, AGM-183 AARRW, USA. The ARRW hits over Mach 20, covering 1,500 plus miles in minutes. Deployed from aircraft, it glides with lateral shifts, avoiding traditional intercept trajectories. No current defense system can track and intercept it in time. It moves too fast and too unpredictably. Before revealing number 1, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Number 1, Avangard, Russia. The Avangard is a hypersonic glide vehicle reaching Mach 20 to 27 over 3,730 miles. Launched from an ICBM, it glides through the atmosphere while constantly shifting speed, altitude, and direction. Its unpredictability and speed render all known defense systems ineffective.
Fascinating. I very much doubt, in fact, that the United States has a comparable missile. I think that is propaganda. The others, however, appear to be perfectly legit. Trump, meanwhile, has sent his nuclear proposal to Tehran, demanding that Iran act quickly, as though he were about to bomb it. President Trump wrapped up his first trip abroad since returning to the Oval Office by saying Iran a proposal for a nuclear agreement, threatening something bad would happen if Tehran did not act quickly. Friday, Trump said he'd pass a proposal and demanded they act or face consequences. The previous day, he said the two sides were close to a deal. But, he's talked about no nuclear enrichment whatsoever, which is frankly absurd. The Iranians will never agree to it. There won't be any quick resolution. They have the status of a sovereign nation, are entitled to do it. And frankly, it's absurd that Trump would offer any such proposal to the contrary. Meanwhile, this is fairly interesting, historically a bit late in the day. The German media are admitting the Anne Frank diary is faked. Tucked away on pages 119 and 122 of the October 6, 2024 issue of Der Spiegel, a weekly German news magazine comparable to Time or Newsweek, was an item of considerable significance. A scientific analysis of the manuscript, said to be the original diary of Anne Frank, a Jewish girl who died in a German concentration camp during World War II, revealed that the manuscript could not have been written before 1951, 6 years after the end of the war and the teenager's death from typhus. As lucrative as the oil industry, the diary of Anne Frank has sold an estimated 30 million copies, translated into over 70 languages. It's considered a powerful memorial of the Holocaust and remains a widely read book today. Inconvenient history, Anne Frank did not write the diary that had been peddled by the triumphant Allies, like Schindler's List, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Carve Her Name with Pride, and thousands of other propaganda fictitious novels. The Diary of Anne Frank, of which no one has ever seen a reported original, is as fake as a child's comic book. And I suspect, by the way, the reason we've never seen the original is that it was written in a ballpoint pen, which did not exist at the time it was purportedly composed. Meanwhile, EU establishment fumes as a far-right candidate closes in on a presidential win in Romania. When EU-backed officials in Romania fabricated the accusation that right-leaning presidential candidate Kalin Georgescu was only popular because of Russian disinformation operation on social media, does that sound familiar? The most common assumption was this was purely a political stunt to draw voters away from his campaign. Instead, The establishment surprised many around the world with Georgescu's arrest and eventual disqualification from the race, just as they've done with Le Pen in France, just as they sought to do with Donald Trump right here in America. To this day, there is still no concrete evidence Russia had any hand in the candidate's campaign or made any measurable effort to sway the election in his favor. Of course not. It was propaganda. Meanwhile, 500,000 marched to Downing Street toward Sturmer to cut ties with Israel. An estimated 600,000 marched through central London to Downing Street on Saturday to commemorate the 77th anniversary of the Nakba. That would be the arrival of the Jews in Israel. The demonstration began at Embankment before passing Big Ben, crossing the river to Waterloo, ending up outside Downing Street, where the PM resigns at number 10. It was organized by the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, Friends of Al-Aqsa, the Muslim Association of Britain, Stop the War, the Palestinian Forum in Britain, and other pro-Palestinian groups. Palestinians came from around the country. Protesters came from around the country, including even from Wales and northern England. Stop the War said the demonstration was attended by an estimated 600,000, making it the biggest protest since November of 2023. Meanwhile, UK to launch a new home guard to protect power plants and airports amid growing world threats. The News Seeker again, Evening Standard. The Home Guard Defense Force could be established to protect key British infrastructure, has been claimed. Part of the upcoming Strategic Defense Review, the new military branch would be made up of volunteers tasked to defend power plants, airports, and communication hubs. The unit will reportedly be modeled on the well-known World War II militia, formed in the face of possible Nazi invasion in the 40s, but may also take inspiration from similar Hold Guard forces that currently exist in other European countries. The Home Guard would be a new organization separate to the Army Reserves while maintaining a similar structure, according to the Sunday Times. Active Home Guards operate in several countries, including Denmark, Germany, Norway, Sweden, and Ukraine. The military review will seek to answer calls to increase defense capabilities against the threat of sabotage in an increasingly hostile geopolitical landscape and rising tensions with Russia, North Korea, and Iran. It will emphasize the need for the Royal Navy to do more to protect undersea energy pipelines and internet cables, and will reportedly suggest funding deals with the large tech companies that depend upon them. More to come. Turning to domestic politics, big, beautiful bill passes Budget Committee in late vote, but changes were made that remain undisclosed. The House Budget Committee pushed forward President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act in a rare late-night session, marking a significant step toward enacting his legislative priorities. The vote, held at 10 p.m. Sunday, narrowly passed 17-16, with 4 Republican holdouts opting to vote present rather than outright rejecting the bill. Their shift allowed the measure to advance despite lingering concerns over spending cuts and policy changes. The bill, spanning 1,116 pages and running about $7 trillion, aims to extend Trump's agenda.
To tell the truth.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Real news, real talk, real people. Because you can handle the truth.
What would you say if I told you?
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Where do they all belong?
Among the latest developments we have is Trump going off on the growing Biden auto pen scandal after the Hur tapes were released. Where the Hur tapes, of course, were his interview with Biden, which went terribly. Biden was highly incoherent. What do we have? President Trump, Saturday morning, went off on the growing Biden auto pen scandal after disturbing audio of Robert Hur's interview with the former president was released. The president said the auto pen scandal is a major part of the real crime. The 2020 presidential election was rigged and stolen, no doubt about it. Trump also slammed dirty cop James Comey for spying on his 2016 campaign. Whoever had control of the auto pen is looking to be a bigger and bigger scandal by the moment. It is a major part of the real crime. That a presidential election in 2020 was rigged and stolen. That is a fact. I have reviewed so much of the evidence there, reported on it again and again and again. Mike Lindell brought out experts who proved it. My senator, Ron Johnson, brought out experts who proved it again. Dinesh D'Souza, with his 2,000 meals, proved it again and again and again. There's so many lines of direction. Jerome Corsi has been instrumental in exposing an algorithm Democrats have used to steal elections again and again prior to 2024, which may be a major contributing factor to why Trump was indeed reelected. Though his competition was so marginal and incompetent, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, it would have been preposterous had he not prevailed. Meanwhile, State of the Nation has published Patrick J. McShay, who was Joe Biden's puppet master. Here you have two quotes from Biden. In Washington, D.C., a gaffe is when you tell the truth. So be careful. Another, in setting an American agenda for a new world order, we must begin with a profound alteration in traditional thought. Last Friday, on the heels of the release of Special Counsel Robert Harris' damaging interview with Joe Biden over his mishandling and possessing classified documents, Biden's spokesperson released a statement that the former president had been diagnosed with advanced metastatic prostate cancer that had spread to his bones. The announcement was major news on all the networks, knocking the subject of the deleterious Hur interview showing Biden's severe dementia off the news cycle for the rest of the weekend. But was this breaking news at all? I didn't hear anyone in the mainstream talking about the statement Biden's brother made to CBS back in July of 2024, why Joe was dropping out of the race when he indicated then that Biden was terminally ill. He said he's happy they'll have Joe back to enjoy whatever time we have left. And let's not forget that in his speech on climate change from the Brayton Point coal fire power station in Somerset, Mass. In 2022, Biden said, "That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up with have cancer." 3 different doctors today, including Dr. Drew on Fox, said the cancer was likely diagnosed much earlier, perhaps 2 or 3, and the author of Obamacare, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, said he may have had it his entire presidency. The announcement was no surprise to anyone who's been paying attention. It sure looks like the official announcement of Biden's cancer was saved for such a time like the release of the Hur report to soften the blow in the media and keep the truth of the severity of Biden's dementia from lingering longer than necessary and stop all the question about just who was running the country the last 4 years. The Hur tapes are damning. Biden asks her, what year is it? 2016 or 2017? How can we be certain anything Biden did was his idea? I never at any time thought Biden was making any decisions. From the open borders to the COVID lockdowns, the poisonous vaccine mandates, the sexualization of grade schools, DEI, CRT, embarrassing Afghanistan withdrawal, this vile administration was hijacked before Biden was even sworn in and set out to destroy the fabric, the culture, and the decency of America. Most of what the Biden admin did, especially the last 2 years, was because none of them thought Trump would ever get elected again. They no doubt thought that the public would never hear the Hur interview in the classified documents case. Lindy Lee was a Biden donor who wrangled big bucks from the well-heeled liberal Democrat class for Joe Biden and was alarmed to learn a couple of years in that Biden's dementia had only been much worse than she or others had thought, but found Biden was no longer functioning as president. She wonders if he ever had. Lou appeared angry in interviews after learning the truth. While Biden was still in office, she found it was well known among Democrat elite that Biden was incapable of functioning as president, and the country was being run by a small group of unelected liberal and Marxist extremists. Lou said the country was run by a committee, including Biden advisors Anita Dunn, Michael Donilon, Gene Sperling, and Steve Rossetti. She also confirmed that Hunter was sitting in on high-level meetings with no security clearance. Lou also said what many suspected: the Biden camp hated the Harris camp and vice versa. She said there was friction during the entire presidency. Hardly the love fest they sought to project. Everything about Biden's presidency was phony. A breaking story on Infowars.com shows an undercover video interview with Biden Deputy Chief of Staff Tyler Robinson, who confesses that Biden was a near vegetable over the last 4 years and was never the president. He named Jeff Zients, who served as White House Chief of Staff from February 2023 to January 2025, under Biden as the most powerful figure in the White House. Robinson said Hillary and her people were in touch with former Clinton staffer and current president CEO of the George Soros-funded Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden, and others at the White House on a daily basis. Soros was accused of directing policy in the Obama White House, and his son and heir, apparent Alex, made numerous visits to the Biden White House. These people all have one thing in common. They all worked in Barack Obama's administration. And Robinson believed they answered to Obama or Hillary, not to Biden. When will the media ask the Kenyan about his involvement in this failed presidency that has his fingerprints all over it? How much of what this admin did is even legitimate? How can his executive orders and pardons stand? And what is Trump prepared to do about it? We shall see. Meanwhile, he went there. Trump posts video compilation of mysterious deaths and suicide linked to Hillary Clinton. And there are a lot of them. My best estimate, 200. Trump published a video entitled, "The Video Hillary Does Not Want You to See," documenting just some of the mysterious suicides linked to the Clinton crime family. The video touched on the deaths of John F. Kennedy Jr., DNC staffer Seth Rich, Clinton White House counsel Vince Foster, Clinton White House intern Mary Mahoney, and others connected to the Clintons. In July of 1999, Hillary Clinton's Senate rival and front runner for the Senate seat in New York, John F. Kennedy Jr., died in a plane crash. Mary Mahoney was a Clinton White House intern, could have been a star witness at the Clinton impeachment trial. She was executed at a D.C. Starbucks in July of 1997. In July of 1993, White House counsel Vince Foster was found dead as an apparent suicide in Fort Marcy Park off the George Washington Parkway in Virginia. 1998, Jane McDougal, a key witness for White House prosecutors and financial partners with Bill and Hill that led to the Whitewater scandal, died of cardiac arrest at a federal correction facility in Fort Worth, Texas, just before he was to testify. In 2015, Clinton White House executive chef, waiter Schlub, died of an accidental drowning after he went on a hike on a trail in Teos, New Mexico. His body was found submerged in a mountain drainage flowing with surface runoff. In July 2016, DNC staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed in D.C. while he was walking home from a bar. It's believed he was the source of the Hillary Clinton DNC leaked emails published by WikiLeaks. That would be Julian Assange. The Clinton DNC emails, published by WikiLeaks, greatly damaged Hillary's 2016 campaign. There is more. You get the idea. It's all true, and I guarantee it all points in the same direction. Meanwhile, he killed himself. FBI Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino doubled down on Epstein claim. I don't believe this for a second. Billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, whose listed clients include some of the world's most elite, really killed himself inside his jail cell. FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino said. Speaking of Fox News Sunday morning features, Maria Bartiromo, Patel and Bongino both confirmed the deceased hedge fund manager who owned Pedophile Island, Lolita Island, actually Little St. James in the Caribbean, died by suicide inside the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City. You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it. Bartiromo pressed the pair. She's right. They're lying. This is very disturbing. All the cameras just go off just at the time this guy commits suicide. We see a body on a stretcher, but it's not Jeffrey Epstein, and it's not inside the correctional facility. Whole thing's fake. The guy was sprung. I have no doubt about it. Meanwhile, what Pam Bondi didn't say in her new admission about the Epstein files will leave you speechless. Attorney General Bondi is in charge of releasing the Epstein files. She has yet to complete the task. And what Pam didn't say in this admission about the files will leave you speechless. Pam Bondi says the delay in releasing the Epstein files is due to videos containing kids. Oh my God. You mean she just figured this out? Pedophilia videos actually contain kids? What is she, an effing moron? This is embarrassingly bad. Attorney General Bondi was supposed to release the Epstein files back in February. That turned into an embarrassment when the documents Bondi made public were a decade old and had already been released. She recently made a statement. The delay in releasing the Epstein files stemmed from the FBI needing to dig through thousands of videos that contain children. Wow! 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 Meanwhile, and this upsets me profoundly, NYU lacks
Too much salt causes hypertension, right?
the diploma of that valiant young man who protested the genocide. Here's Jimmy.
Honestly, and as I search my heart today in addressing you all, my moral and political commitments guide me to say that the only thing that is appropriate to say in this time and to a group this large is a recognition of the atrocities currently happening in Palestine.
Bad boy. Bad boy. We're all behind a genocide, a modern-day Holocaust. The establishment is. How did Hitler ever happen? Well, now you know, because it's happening right now, and the establishment's on board. So guess what they did? So this guy was giving a speech at NYU's graduation ceremony, and he spoke out about what's happening in Israel, Gaza. And now they're withholding his diploma. And they're formally investigating the student who noted the atrocities currently happening in Palestine. Endless punishment for those who criticize Israel's war. The school's excuse, the speech he submitted for approval didn't contain what he said. Yeah.
No, he paid. Do you know how much it costs to go to NYU?
A lot. So NYU has what they call, I'm going to guess it's a more of an impurity test. You know, they say a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a conscience is a liability at NYU. You want to see what he actually said?
Yes.
Here's what he said to get him investigated by NYU and for them to take away his diploma. Here we go.
So please join me in welcoming to the podium the NYU Gallatin 2025 student speaker, Logan Rosas.
My name is John. I'm the founder of Blackout Coffee, and I started Blackout because I really love coffee. I've always loved coffee, and after traveling so much to Europe, South America, and trying so many different coffees that were so good, and every time I came back to the U.S., I was so disappointed with the coffee, so I figured that I had to do something about it. The biggest difference is on the beans and the roasting process, how we roast it, and how fresh it is. The fresher the roast, the better the quality.
Not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind. I'll open up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down.
5 final stories for today. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, got a scare that could affect her career. Let's see how the story plays out. Stephen A. Smith says AOC is unelectable. A new coefficient poll shows Democrats view AOC as the leader of the Democratic Party. AOC leads the next nearest contender, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, by a 2-to-1 margin. If you want to see the lineup of the current Democratic Party, and this tells us how weak is their bench. AOC 26%, Bernie Sanders 12%. Jasmine Crockett, 8. Kamala Harris, 6. Hakeem Jeffries, 5. Pete Buttigieg, 5. Gavin Newsom, 2. No one, 26%, other, 22. That's really pathetic. Meanwhile, Judge Jeanine Pirro has sent D.C. into a panic by receiving an appointment to the bench. Get this. Trump ally takes control of the swamp most powerful prosecution office. President Trump just played his Trump card in a battle against the deep state. Former Fox News firebrand, longtime Trump defender Jeanine Pirro was sworn in Wednesday as the new interim U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C., putting her in charge of one of the most powerful prosecution offices in America. The move sent shockwaves through the halls of the Justice Department, where career prosecutors had grown accustomed to operating without accountability. I like Judge Jeanine. I think she'll do a good job. Pandemonium. Too dead after Mexican Navy smashes into the Brooklyn Bridge. Can you believe? 2 people were killed in last night's collision between a Mexican Navy ship carrying 277 aboard in the Brooklyn Bridge. This was a few days back. I wanted to mention it in passing. RFK Jr. shocks Washington with bold reforms and anti-big pharma stance. RFK Jr., the new Health and Human Service Secretary, is stirring the pot in Washington. It's about time. He's pushing back hard against the Democrats and their constant moaning about his spending cuts and vaccine policies. Despite being a Democrat himself, RFK Jr. seemed to have forgotten to adhere to the left's gospel of limitless spending and blind acceptance of all things big pharma. Instead, he's using his position to demand the recognition he deserves for reforms he's bringing to the table. I like it. Meanwhile, FDA seeking to remove indigestible fluoride products from kids' teeth from the market.